nicknamed the Brown Bomber. He resigned as the world heavyweight champion from 1937 until his temporary retirement. In 1949. He was instrumental in integrating the game of golf. The former Pipe O' Peace golf course in Riverdale, Illinois, was renamed Joe Louis, the Champ Golf Course in 1986. In his heyday, Louis was the subject of many musical tributes, including a number of blues songs. Joe Louis, the hardest puncher that ever lived, was the second of 8 children, born May 13, 1914 in Alabama. He was introduced to boxing by a friend. He changed his name to Joe Louis, so his mother wouldn't find out that he was boxing instead of going to school. Toward the end of his life, Louis had a job as a greeter for a Las Vegas casino. He died on April 12, 1981. President Ronald Reagan allowed Louis to be buried at the Arlington National Cemetery with military honors. Joe Louis, y'all. And we have with us also Miss Mary Bethune. Miss Mary Jane McLeod Bethune was an American educator, philanthropist, humanitarian, woman civil rights activist. Bethune founded the National Civil of Negro Women in 1935. Born Mary Jane McLeod, July 10, 1987, in a small log cabin near Maysville, South Carolina, on a rice and cotton farm. She was the 15th of 17 children. McLeod noticing racial inequality as a child, observing the black community had access to less material wealth and opportunity. She particularly remembered visiting the home of the Wilsons, the family that enslaved her mother. She explored the playhouse and found a book. Girls admonished her with, "Put that book down, you can't read." McLeod contrasted her desire for literacy and education. Bethune carried a care for effect rather than mobility support, stating that it gave her swank style meaning. She married Albertus Bethune in 1898, but Bethune worked briefly as a school. In 1896, she began teaching at Hines Normal, an industrial institute in Augusta, Georgia. After her marriage in Florida, Bethune became determined to start a school for girls. Bethune started the educational and industrial training for the Negro girls. On May 18, 1955, Bethune died. Her death was followed by editorial tributes in African American newspapers across the United States. In 1899, Ebony magazine listed her as one of the 50th most important figures in Black American history. Miss Mary McLeod Bethune. Ironically, Donna is a teacher.
Yeah, I was fascinated by who he spoke about. I chose the name. I was going to read what she read, but I'm not bringing my eyeglasses for reading. Yes. I read about this woman. I was inspired a lot by her. She was an educator, and I was an educator during my whole life. Yes.
All right. In the audience, we have another guest also, Miss Madam C.J. Walker. Welcome there. She's supposed to be styling. This is Miss Madam C.J. Walker, a Black American entrepreneur, the first female self-made millionaire in America. Miss Walker made her fortune by developing and marketing a line of cosmetics and hair products for the Black woman. Madam C.J. Walker was born Sarah Breedlove. Breedlove had 5 siblings, 4 brothers and 1 sister. She was orphaned at 7 and stayed with her older sister. At the age of 14, Breedlove married Moses McWilliams and had 1 daughter, Lelia. After the death of her husband, she remarried John Davis in 1903. In 1906, she married Charles Joseph Walker, a newspaper advertising salesman. And after this marriage, Breedlove began marketing herself, Madam C.J. Walker. Madam C.J. Walker. And we also have our last guest in the audience, Miss Ella Fitzgerald.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah. An American Black singer, songwriter, and composer. Her status rose dramatically in the 1950s when jazz impresario Norman Granz became her manager. She was an excellent ballad singer. She made her first recording, Love and Kisses, in 1935, and her first hit, A Ticket, a Tasket, followed in 1938. She became an international legend during a career that spanned from 6 decades. Ella won 14 Grammy Awards, including one of Lifetime Achievement. She toured internationally with such pop and jazz stars as Benny Goodman, Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Brothers, the Ink Spots, and Dizzy Gillespie.
Chick Webb. And Chick Webb was the drummer and the main band at the Roseland Ballroom in New York. That place was so incredible in terms of the day that they had to replace the floors every year. So imagine the dancing that went on. What I like to talk about is I think in Black history is probably one of the most important people that gets overlooked today because jazz isn't as important as it used to be, and that's Duke Ellington. Duke Ellington pretty much laid pretty low in the 20s with his band, like at the Cotton Club in New York, because he couldn't travel and wasn't accepted as a Black man in places that wouldn't allow them and his band to stay in restaurants to eat. So consequently, he was sidelined. He wasn't able, like Benny Goodman and Tommy Dorsey and Artie Shaw, to get the recognition, popular recognition that they would get. So Duke Ellington, he didn't get upset about that. He just got more determined and became more of a master at performing his groups of musicians, which were incredible musicians within their own right. And he set up a program within his band to allow the musicians to solo, which was to play, stand up when it was their time, to play off of him on piano the compositions the way that they wanted to express them. So you had an incredible amount of self-expression within the instrument. You had Johnny Hodges on saxophone, Cootie Williams on trumpet. You had people that were expressing the instrument within the context of his compositions that were just incredible. So, come on, turn that up. That's
You can see it.
As you can hear, Duke Ellington was a composer, but he was also an excellent pianist. And he was unusual in the sense that his band and his music in the swing era started more or less in the 20s and went into the 30s. But then he also promoted blues, waltz, and other combinations all the way into the 50s. So I don't think, as far as Black history goes, there's a person in the arts that contributed as much as he did. And the individual players in his bands were good enough to form smaller groups that went on to you can imagine the energy of this kind of music. If you've never heard a big band live, it pretty much lifts you up, and you cannot stand around and not dance. And when I was young, I was brought up by a French-Canadian woman who would not let me not dance. As far as having hair, I had an afro when I was 2 years old. So it was like, let your hair grow natural and let it express yourself. And we entertainment things that you would have today. But we had lots of fun, big band music. And my father sang in clubs when he wasn't working, and my mother sang around the house. So I grew into understanding music, not whether or not it was made by a white person or a black person or whatever. It was like, this is the music. You're going to learn how to use it and dance and socially connect through music. And it was music that actually, hearing these things, everyone else would start to get interested in the other art forms that existed, especially during the 50s when you had abstract expressionist artists in New York City. I didn't live that far from New York City, in Springfield, Massachusetts, so, I felt connected with what the abstract painters were doing in terms of the jazz music of that day. I don't know, Mark, do you have my favorite stuff? Yeah, here's Miles Davis in '59 with probably the greatest recorded composition of jazz ever made. And I'm not just saying that, it's in the top 5. You have Hedderford on bass, Bill on the piano, and they started out this composition which is called So What. Miles Davis is the leader of this group, along with John Coltrane on saxophone and Cannonball Adderley on saxophone. And Melvin Jones on I actually, as a visual artist, paint to jazz music, so I listen to it almost every day. So, and other jazz musicians who play jazz in other countries all around the world. So this phenomenon of jazz that came out of the Black culture in America is one of the most important historical events that I think that has happened in America. I mean, for me, when I was younger, aside from Willie Mays and playing baseball. This was happening without me really being attuned to it. It took me a while to jump to it, and when I did, and listened to it all the time, started to realize what these people were accomplishing as musicians, and what they were sharing with the world. Now, African musicians, especially in West Africa, had dances in music like the samba and the other music that changed the direction of countries when they were to Brazil and other world. So music from Africa, especially drumming, had a lot to do with, the evolution of the music itself. And jazz pretty much, it still has an impact, but it doesn't have the same popular interest that it had all the way up to the 70s. And then other musicians from other parts of the world came into the situation. You had more Latin jazz contributions. People on saxophone like Gato Barbieri, in rock music you have Carlos Santana, and then you had Miles Davis starting to add rock musicians and electronic musical instruments to the jazz music and the fusion music that was played in the 70s and 80s. And I had a chance when I was younger to actually go to music festivals in Michigan where they would have a blues and jazz festival, and you were able to see Ray Charles, Sun Ra, Miles Davis, and others to get an idea of what this music was doing to people and how it was spreading and contributing to the musical universe. But I don't know, I wasn't raised to understand in a Christian household. I wasn't involved with the duality of black and white as far as creative abilities. It was, these people have this ability. You should understand and respect it for what it is, because you have it too. You can be involved with rhythm and an understanding of socializing with certain language terms, just like they do. So you need to learn this. And when I went to school in Boston, that was one of the first things I had to learn, was how to communicate shorthand with colloquialisms. And it was like jazz music. You had to improvise when you're less in the street, which I was a part of, having to work and go to art school and practice medicine and everything that I did when I was in Boston. But jazz became important in understanding things like improvising or just experimenting with and how to adapt it to that culture to get by and educate yourself to what was happening. And by doing that, listening to jazz, you start to understand more about the black situation. And later on, when I got out of the Vietnam War situation, practiced in civil disobedience and was involved in the civil rights movement as much as I could, until they decide that you're a little too much in the community and they're going to put you away. So I decided, well, that ain't going to work, because I can do more if I'm. And when I moved to Dallas, I lived and had a studio in South Dallas. So a white person wasn't supposed to be in South Dallas because of the racial attitude that people have here. But I did it anyway, and I went to church in South Dallas. They accepted me. I loved it. Going to St. Anthony's down there. It was very warm, and I had Black musicians and poets come to my loft and do performance artworks. Some of them related to African culture. And they had to do with music and different kinds of art performance. So jazz has always been a mentor, a way to balance an understanding of what's being created in all the other musical languages, because they're out doing whatever they're having to do and say for the culture. And some of it's okay, but at least it's a measure of quality. And people like Miles Davis and John Coltrane set the quality standard in their day. Now, you can interpret that today in terms of hip hop or whatever you're into, rap or whatever music you like. So that's what I wanted to contribute. Mainly a tribute to Duke Ellington. I mean, the guy was just, I don't know what more you can say about him. His music over the years to perform that long and carry and keep a band organized, the musicians. It's hard enough for a group of 4 or 5 musicians to keep a band. And the other thing I wanted to say was, the other aspect of it was Berry Gordy, who started Motown Records in Detroit, that used the jazz community as part of his band to back the musical groups that developed, like the Temptations and Supremes and different groups that were developed from Motown. So Motown had jazz, older jazz musicians, keeping the beats and the contexts of the songs flowing. And then you have guys like Smokey Robinson, who was brilliant. If it wasn't for him, Berry Gordy wouldn't have gotten his first hits. First hit was Shop Around, Smokey Robinson, and then the girl groups that were competing in Detroit contributed. And then you had Motown. But Motown helped me because I was able to go to record shops in South Boston to buy LPs that I could play in my